So we're gonna finish this day by discussing the new world of work taking shape. And this discussion we will begin with a presentation by Mr. OLLI KOSKI. Please.
That's right.
And Mr. OLLI KOSKI is director at the Finnish Ministry of Economic and Employment.
Yes.
And he has a special task, and that is to conduct the Finnish government's work on artificial intelligence and its impact on society and labor market. Very interesting question. Look forward to hearing about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear friends, for inviting me here to Stockholm, to this great venue. I have to say about my background that I started in the ministry beginning of January this year, so I'm quite new to the ministry. As was mentioned, I'm a director in the Enterprise and Innovation Department of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. But before this, I was in Finnish SAK, or Finska LU, for 12 years. And the last 6 years, I was the chief economist of SAK, and also the director for industrial policy in SAK. So my background, my long background is in the labor movement, and now I'm quite a new addition to the ministry. But it's very nice that you invited me here, and now the views I'm presenting here are somewhat quite well. They are the ministry's views and about the work we have done with this project. A few words about the artificial intelligence project. It was launched about a half a year ago by the Minister for Economic Affairs, and he and the Prime Minister, these two guys, are very enthusiastic about the whole subject. And this work is organized in a couple of working groups, of which one deals with artificial intelligence and the impact it will probably have on labor markets and on the society. And I am a facilitator or a secretary in this working group. It's quite a big working group. It also incorporates also the social partners in Finland, the employers and the employees organizations. And then we have researchers who are doing their work with artificial intelligence, and also experts who are researching working life. So it's quite a big working group, but has many different actors, many different viewpoints inside the working group. And this presentation is based on what we have discussed in this group. Outline today is I will try to answer three questions. First of all, why is everybody talking about artificial intelligence nowadays? The second question, how will it possibly affect the labor market? The problem, of course, with artificial intelligence is that we can make some quite educated guesses about how the technology will develop in the coming, let's say, 5 years, 2 to 5 years in the medium term. But it's very difficult, and we have some observations about what the state of play in the technology field right at the moment is. But it's very much more difficult to say anything about its impacts in the labor market and its impacts for employment, because we really don't have any very concrete observations so far about artificial intelligence and its impact on jobs, because it's still in its very early stages, the implementation of the technology. But I'll make some guesses about this. And finally, what policies should the Nordic countries or any other country, what policies should we promote to reap the benefits of artificial intelligence and also to mitigate the possible risks related to the technology? Okay. First of all, artificial intelligence has been around since 1955, when they organized a conference on this issue in the United States, and then people were of course very optimistic about artificial intelligence and the possibilities related to it. And after this initial very positive thinking around artificial intelligence, there was a very long period of winter concerning this technology. People lost faith in it, and there were no big steps forward in implementing the technology. But now it seems to be somewhat over, and there has been progress. Well, it can be characterized that what has happened is that there's been a paradigm shift in the technology, because in the 50s, 60s, people were thinking about that we should try to make a very comprehensive model of the human brain. Sort of, for example, if you are going to make an artificial intelligence in the field of natural language, you should make a computer program so that you program all different aspects of grammatic inside in your program, and then try to make it as perfect as possible, as comprehensive as possible. But this, of course, proved to be very difficult, because human language, it has certain rules, but then it has a lot of exceptions to the rules, and these exceptions are not very logical all the time. But the paradigm shift has been that now people are not trying to build a comprehensive model, but rather put enormous amounts of data and then let the computers find patterns in the data. So not trying to be perfect at the start, but having huge amounts of data and then iterating round and round, doing simulations and then getting the algorithms right. And this is called machine learning or deep learning, and it's of course behind this is a huge growth in the computation potential we can process vast amounts of data, and we have this data in the first place. So now that everything is connected to internet and we are having a general digitalization, we have this data that can be used to feed artificial intelligence. And there have been notable demonstrations like AlphaGo, which beat the world champion in Go, the ancient Chinese game, which is more difficult than chess, I've been told, and of which you all probably have heard of this. And then we have image recognition, where artificial intelligence and applications around it are becoming better than human doctors in identifying cancer from medical pictures and so on. And then we all know, we all use Facebook and Twitter, and both of them use what you can call machine learning and artificial intelligence applications in, well, coming up with adverts and putting certain posts before others and so on. And these, as we all know, sometimes they do a very good job, sometimes they do a very lousy job in this, but the algorithms are getting better. And one can say nowadays that everybody who is connected to the internet and uses social media is dealing with artificial intelligence every day. Well, what are the positives and negatives of current technologies? If we start with the positive things, we can automate routine tasks nowadays. I mentioned the doctors. Another field of both of these are, by the way, the one interesting aspect to my mind concerning this is both the doctor profession and the lawyer's legal profession are both professions that require high education, long education nowadays, and both of them have aspects where artificial intelligence may automate certain tasks of these professions. So it might be a sort of a new phenomenon that AI will also affect highly educated people, whereas previous waves of automation and technological progress might have had a very large impact on low educated people and manufacturing jobs, and not so much of the highly educated workforce. But we'll see what happens. Well, here you can, for example, the comparison of thousands of pages of contracts in mergers and acquisition deals. This can be automated and has been automated. So routine tasks can be automated, and then artificial intelligence can surpass human performance in certain areas like image recognition and playing Go. And well, we humans, economists call this bounded rationality or restricted rationality. Humans are not rational, as we know, and artificial intelligence can come over some of human logic, erroneous logic. So we shouldn't, in some tasks, humans shouldn't rely on their intuition and their guts so much. They should rely on computers making the right decisions in some areas, and in some areas AI can surpass human possibilities. So what about negatives? These are not very often mentioned, but I've come up with a few here. AI can make mistakes. That should be remembered, and it's not transparent because the paradigm shift has happened. It learns from the data, the huge amount of data, and nobody exactly knows how the algorithm optimizes itself, and it's impossible to say afterwards if there's been a mistake on why did it make it. It can be impossible to say why it made the mistake. So there can be questions about responsibility if something goes wrong. It's not transparent. And so far, we are not anywhere, we are not even close, or we are not getting even closer to sort of general AI, which works on its own and learns on its own or doing something independently. So nowadays, and in the foreseeable future, we are talking about narrow AI, narrow technology in certain areas, in certain applications. I myself, I'm not a fan of talking about deep learning, because learning is something where usually you are going for yourself into the outside your mental box and looking for some new things, learning independently on your own, and the computer and AI doesn't do anything like this. The AI nowadays, it's force-fed. It's like, I heard a good comparison, which, pardon me, is a bit cruel, but you know, foie gras, that's the traditional way of making foie gras is to force-fed the duck. And the AI nowadays is you are force-feeding it. It's like the duck which is being force-fed, and with data. AI is force-fed with data, and then it comes up with the algorithm. It doesn't do anything on its own, so humans you have to be teaching it, which comes to my final negative point. There is costs related to training AI. Of course, technology companies have found ways to minimize the training costs. This can be outsourced to India or Bangladesh, where people are clicking, is there a dog in the picture or not? So teaching the AI, it's quite cheap to do it there, but still, you have to train AI. And if you want to have, more advanced applications, then you need more advanced trainers as well. So training costs can be quite high here. Then second question, impact on labor market. Well, first of all, as has been mentioned very many times today here, probably, hopefully, is that there's always been quite a lot of restructuring in the labor market. First we were gatherers, hunters, then we were in agriculture, then in manufacturing, and now in services. The big picture is like this. And probably the job losses related, for example, when transferring from agricultural society to industrial society and post-industrial society, the job losses and the restructuring was even higher than what we are seeing right now, that's for sure. And probably it was higher than what's coming in the next 5-10 years. So this will probably not bring such a big restructuring in the labor market. And as was mentioned in the FAFO session, in the other parallel session which I was listening to, not that many professions in totality will be automated, but many tasks inside the professions will be. So when you analyze the professions so that it consists of a list of tasks, many of these tasks will probably be automated, but the professions themselves, there's quite a few professions where you have 80 or 90% of the tasks involved are all automated and can be automated. So this is one sketch. This is following the lines of what McKinsey has done recently this year on artificial intelligence automation potential. Its highest automation potential is in the lower part of the triangle, where you have collecting and processing data, transport sector, manufacturing, maybe routine services like shop clerks, people behind the tiller. There you have tasks that everybody can see that a lot of these tasks can be automated. Whether it makes economic sense to automate them, it might take some time. And people are unpredictable. Maybe we like to pay a little bit to be serviced by humans, and then automation will not proceed so rapidly. But that's up to the market and the consumers to decide. And then in the middle section you have construction work, where some tasks can be automated, and of course new IT technologies can be made to save labor. But for example, a plumber's job, that's something that has proven to be very difficult for a robot to do the plumber's job if you don't have standardized plumbing, and which for example, in old buildings you never have. Then we have financial services, customer service, because some tasks can be automated, but then customer servants and people in those services can do other things that the machine, tasks which involve emotions and social skills. So far we haven't been able to teach artificial intelligence any emotions or social skills. But actually this is some area that some progress has been made. That some machines are becoming also emphatical and maybe have some people can get attached to them as well. And then on the top, where little automation potential is seen, is education, health services, information technology, communication technology, professional services. So this is the standard sort of way of looking at things. One aspect that is not very often mentioned is, I think, that robots actually are long overdue. Robots are late. We need them urgently, because as you all know, the talk about secular stagnation, the productivity growth, according to many economists, productivity has been decreasing at quite a steady pace from the 70s up to nowadays. This is GDP growth rates per year, which is the equivalent of productivity growth. We can have the debate on do we know how to measure productivity? That's a very big discussion. I'm not going into that now, but there are, and it can of course explain a part of the decrease in growth rates, but maybe not all of them. So to get back into the rising of living standards, which we experienced in the 70s and 80s, we would need more technology, more robots, more automation. And that's especially because many countries in Europe are experiencing the problem of aging. And I'll just add that if we get more robots and automation, the robots and the owners of the robots will not get all the benefits. Most of the benefits will go to the consumers here if we have competition in the markets. Maybe I will, sorry, maybe because time is short, I might have a couple of minutes maybe, just to make the point that most of these technologies are characterized by winner takes it all, where it favors if you're an early adopter. And there is evidence that some firms are much better than some others in adopting these technologies. So there are growing productivity differentials between firms. And this is something that labor market organizations, social partners probably need to take into account, that there are big differences inside the same industry between firms. And if you're doing collective agreements in the industry level, this might create sort of tensions inside the industry. So just to take a note, it seems that technology has this aspect. This is these are the key policies for success in what we have identified. So be early adopter of technology, educate and train workers. I should stress the importance of social intelligence. So not just mathematics, but actually mathematics combined with social intelligence. So not just trying to educate everybody to be a coder or something like this, but it seems that these non-cognitive social intelligence skills are very much needed. And that's the human advantage compared to artificial intelligence and machines. Then we have, and one aspect on regulation is data privacy, data protection. There you have to strike the balance between, because AI and development of AI needs a lot of data, and you need to strike the right balance between protecting privacy and the ability of firms to use this data to develop new applications. Then I have one thing about unemployment insurance. In my mind, having earnings-related unemployment insurance is good for risk-taking. It's good for people who want to take risks, join a startup company, form a startup company if you have some social security behind you. I'm not a believer in basic income or anything like that. For me, that's a dead-end street. It's not a working solution to this. And if you want to have wage supplements, if the technology goes in the direction that you have a polarization of the labor market, many more new low-wage jobs and many more high-wage jobs and lose on the middle, that's a possibility. But then you should, and if you need to supplement the low-wage people to get them into labor market, you should couple these supplements with training initiatives so that people are gaining more human capital and they are not stuck in the low-wage jobs for the rest of their lives. So that's a big risk in my view in the models of just subsidizing low wages and having sort of which universal basic income might be one solution in this category, but it should be combined with training. Summary. This is just summarizing the presentation. I'd say many dull tasks will be automated, which is a good thing. We don't want to be bored in our jobs. New jobs will be better. And if you have a working labor market and growth in your economy, then the net employment effect will be positive. Thank you for your attention.
So just a quick question for Olli, perhaps while we get the panelists direct with some of the equipment. I'm quite fond that you enter the subject of unemployment insurance, because we haven't talked so much about that today.
Yep.
And you ended up saying that if you have working labor markets, this will be good. So from your point of view, what does a working labor market entail, and could you perhaps very quickly say something about the role of trade unions and the role policies do to support these have for a well-functioning labor market, aka the Nordic model? How do we keep on supporting that if we want to go into this more, if not utopian, then at least not dystopian picture of the future and what AI will bring? Can you say a few words about that?
That's a very difficult question and a very sort of hot topic for me to answer, but I'd say the foundation of the Nordic model is to have a very good education for everybody, to have everybody coped with skills and also skills that make people able to reap the benefits of AI. So everybody understands AI, everybody can sort of work with the basic concepts of AI. So keep this in mind, and if you have a good distribution of skills, even distribution, then you have an even distribution of wages, equality, and so on in the market. But the technology, it probably, if it has the skill bias effect that you favor high-skilled people and then you have a lot of low-skilled jobs, then you have a challenge for the Nordic model of even wage distribution. Then you might have to accept a higher level of wage inequality, maybe not, but maybe yes, and then rely on sort of taxation and social insurance to maintain the overall equality in society. But there are, of course, big challenges. The unemployment insurance, you need that to cope with the risks involved in here, and to favor risk-taking as well. But you should also combine, if you have a very generous unemployment insurance, then of course you have issues with incentives, as economists can tell you, but these need to be matched with the insurance part.
Thank you very much, Olli, for these insights. Give him a hand. Excellent, and if we can get the other panelists on stage, and I think we will try to group them down there, so I can make sure that they don't make any unsuspected moves. Please welcome Thorsten Albrecht, the Permanent State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs from Germany, and DEBORAH Greenfield, which we already met earlier, and I was going to say a new contestant entering the stage right now being rigged, which is NANNA HØJLUND. Give her a hand. And NANNA and I, we're from the same organization. She is the vice president of LO Denmark, the Danish Confederation of Trade Unions. So, but welcome guys to this, this wonderful panel. I think we will do it that way that I'll ask each of you to, as short as possible, and I'm thinking max 3 minutes, to give your main thoughts on this subject we're discussing. And then I think we're going to try and do it a bit back and forth between you guys, but also trying to get the audience to involve themselves in the discussion about this. So perhaps Thorsten, let's start with you.
Yeah, I was very impressed about this project about artificial intelligence, and I think the speech said it all, where the issues are, especially about responsibility. And we had a case in Germany 3 weeks ago. A person was arrested preparing a terrorist attack, and the police was tracing what he was doing. And they found out that he bought the chemicals he needed for the bomb via Amazon. And when he started with the first chemical, there was this suggestion, customers who bought this also were interested in that. So he didn't even need a plan. So it was a perfect algorithm behind it for the customer, because he found what he wanted. But maybe some responsibility and some decision is still needed, also when we talk about this. And I think this is maybe an extreme example, but when we talk about using this technology in the world of work, I would never say stop it, try to avoid it, but we have to shape it. And we have to make sure that human beings are still at the center of creating the workplaces of the future and not leave that to technology. And I think that's the crucial point, and then we can talk about all the single issues.
Interesting, thanks. DEBORAH.
Well, first of all, I really appreciated Olli's presentation, because in settings like this, we often talk about artificial intelligence, I'll speak for myself, without much, oh, sorry. There we go.
The acoustics are good.
We often talk about artificial intelligence and what it will do in the labor market in settings like this without actually having someone talk to us about artificial intelligence. And so I learned a lot. I would say the fact that there's been a paradigm shift since the 50s, for me, demonstrates that humans are still in control. Because I think as we've developed technology and we've developed artificial intelligence, we've shifted the paradigm. And so we've shifted the ways in which artificial intelligence can work for us. And to me, that demonstrates that we're not in a techno-deterministic universe. We're in a universe where ultimately we are in charge. Nonetheless, I thought there were some very important distributional issues that OLLI raised. For example, there is quite a lot about being a lawyer that's routine, rote, boring, and repetitive. I can say that because it's my experience as a lawyer. But I can imagine a world, and I would include medical issues here too, where you have to pay for state-of-the-art use of artificial intelligence. So do indigent people who are accused of a crime get to have a lawyer who has the ability to use artificial intelligence? Does someone who is not in a universal healthcare system have the benefit of the kind of artificial intelligence that detects patterns in cancer? That's on an individual basis, but you could also look at this on a global basis and talk about how artificial intelligence will or won't be used in developing countries versus developed countries. OLLI talked about new applications of artificial intelligence. To me, that raises the question of who decides. Is it a private entity that decides how we use artificial intelligence? Is it the state? Is it a private entity? And then we have some distributional policy around it. So I think those raise, the development and the use of artificial intelligence raise for me key questions about equity and fairness of information.
Thanks, Deborah. And Nanna, besides being responsible for gender equality and shop steward training, you are also responsible for our business and R&D policy.
Yeah, that's true.
In the Danish LO. So from that perspective, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, first of all, I really like what you were just saying right now, Deborah, because I think this whole question about governance, how are we going to create a new kind of democracy where there also be this will be the new thing, and how can we use it in the good way and not let it be just the thing that's taking over for all of us. So I think there's a question about governance and how we can regulate both a labor market, but also a health system, a justice system, and a lot of other things where this will come and be a part of the way that we are dealing with things. But then I also think that today I've listened to a lot of talk about how is this Danish model or the Nordic model, but now I'm from Denmark, so I would just call it the Danish model. How is it going to work for the future? And can we use it when we have this? It can be the artificial intelligence, but it can also be digitization or automation, and the way it will change the labor market. And I think a very important thing here is to believe in the model that we have right now, and believe that we should use this model to make the regulation, to make the governance, to make aware of what we are going to do to adapt to this new future. And back in Denmark, we just finished a big tripartite agreement on skills for the future. Just taking one step. I think we will have to take a lot of steps in that direction, but we have taken one step. And that's good, because that's a part of this story about, well, there's coming new things, we will have to work in new ways, but we will also be strong enough as unions to make the people who are working out there secure for the future. And I think this is so important for us to talk about this, that people should be able to feel secure in the way that they have a job they can live from, they have the skills for the future, And also we will build a society where there will still be democracy. Sometimes when I'm out talking to people about this, they say, well, what about democracy? So this raises the big questions. And I think we as unions should be able to address those questions and have that conversation with the members of the unions, because this is what the future is about for them. So the big questions, we should really be able to answer them, but we should believe in the way that we have always adapted to change as unions.
I heard some applause here. You're more than welcome to yell yay or yay boo or whatever. Everything of that's good. So guys, already now, if some of you have some points for this, feel free to throw up your hand up in the air, and I'll try to involve you. But otherwise, Torben, what are your thoughts about this that NANNA is saying now? You talked about some of this interesting a fact about how algorithms can be both good and bad. What is your take on this whole inequality discussion, and which OLLI also talked about, perhaps more like on a specific basis with like unemployment insurance and so forth? What is your experience also with your work with the 4.0 in Germany?
I think it's a crucial issue, and we have to discuss it really on all the levels, from the very down-to-earth question whether a person working on a platform is an employee or self-employed. And of course, lines are blurring there, not only because more people are out there, but also that the normal workplaces are changing. For example, in Germany, the distinction, a crucial role plays whether you can decide when and where you want to work, whether you're self-employed or not. But of course, this is changing with employees as well. In my ministry, we will allow people working there from 1st of January to choose their working time and working place themselves. Of course, they have to talk to their team before, but they have no fixed times where they have to stay in the ministry. So I think the lines are blurring from all sides. So from this very single points where we need to look whether we need new regulations, but even more so, I would say, use the old regulations, because new ones are always in the danger to be special and then not so strong. Rather try to use the old one, but we have to adapt. Up to the general debate, we touched upon democracy. I think we touched upon the issue of data protection, but also the issue who owns the data. If I give data to Google, it's quite obvious that I give my data away as a customer. But if I drive a car, I also give my data away. Maybe I don't know it. So this question of data ownership, and even maybe what does it mean for taxation, etc., has to be tackled, up to the general question, are we facing a new form of what we call in Germany digital capitalism? Not to say that is something we want to prevent, but as an analytical tool to understand that the fabric of our economy is changing fundamentally. And the challenge is that from this very grand design questions down to labor law issues, we have to face a lot of questions and try to find some understanding. And I think that's why we need some vision and some general understanding about quality work, etc., which stays with all the changes we're facing.
Digital capitalism, that's a good term. I remember when I met Six the first time in Frankfurt, I was quite fond of the term das Plattformkapitalismus. I think that kind of that said exactly what it was about, without the whole, the sharing economy, all this greenwashing. So I think words are also important in this aspect. Does anyone want to pitch in on these subjects? Otherwise, we'll let Deborah reflect on what Torben just said.
I would say one thing about the distinction between employed and self-employed. I agree entirely with Torben that it's too early to have a different paradigm of the employment relationship. First of all, I think the platform economy is too small to create the kind of upheaval that would be very difficult to reverse by having a new model of employment, which I think inevitably will relax the relationship between employers and employees and make it more difficult for workers to determine who their employer is, and more difficult to place responsibility on anyone but the employee himself or herself. I think we have to really wait and see what happens and see how this fits into the models we already have. I think in an odd sort of way, all of this information makes us all equal. That is, we can all look up whatever, as long as we're connected. On the other hand, there is a huge concentration of knowledge and information, or maybe we need to distinguish between information and knowledge, in a handful of companies. Is that any different than having a handful of companies who controlled the railroads? Is that any different than the handful of companies who control airplanes? So we may be entering an age where the type of capital is different, but it's capital nonetheless. And finally, I want to say something about aging, because I think this is very important. With the youth bulge in Africa and parts of Asia, and the growing, the aging of the populations in developed countries, we're going to need to revamp our care economy. And here I think that artificial intelligence and technology can provide huge opportunities to upgrade the kind of work that the care economy requires. And I hope that we can do this in a relatively short period of time, because we're going to need to rebalance who does the care work in our societies.
Nanna, what is your thoughts?
Well, I think this, as you said, the pressure from the new, I think that's so interesting. That has been the big discussion in Denmark, that now we have something new, so we have to change everything. And I think it's so important when you have that discussion to hold on to what you really got and what is working. So I totally agree on the thing is that we have the things that will work for this future. I think we have a lot of regulation that we should use. We saw it in Denmark. We took a little time on this Uber case, but in the end, we had the law that regulated Uber out of Denmark. And that was interesting, that we could do that. And I think it was really good for us, because we needed to see ourselves that we can use our laws and we can use the regulation to change things. So that was good. But I think this pressure from the new, we should turn that around, and I think we should turn it around and have the discussion not about how we all need to be flexible in the future, because that's pretty much what we will meet right now. I was just thinking when you told about the new work kind of way you were working in your ministry, I was thinking, well, that's something that we hear a lot. We all need to be so flexible for the future, because the future demands it. Well, are we sure about that? I think the future demands a lot of things, and some of it might be that we are more flexible, but I also think that the future demands that we have more equality, that we all have a way that we can get the education that we need, that we have good healthcare, and a lot of other things. And I think that is the discourse about this future of work. We really need to get into that and change it a bit, because then it could be much more about democracy and equality, and not so much only about being flexible and being able to work every hour, both night and day, and being able to work 2 hours here and 3 hours there and then go on to something new. This is a discussion that we should take in, and we should also give our demands on how should the labor market be for the future. And I think I'm from a union, and that's the most important thing right now, is to raise our voices, that this is not something that is coming upon us that we cannot change. This is politics. This is regulation. This is law. And we can change it. And we can make it work for the better or for the worse. And that's a very, very important discussion I think we need to have in Denmark and in Sweden and Norway and Germany and all over. How do we want this new thing to come and be a part of our society? Should we everybody now work day and night because that's what we need for the future? I don't think so. I think we can work smarter, and some people might want to work more flexible. But in Denmark, it has been a discussion like everybody needs to work that way, and everybody needs to have work home and work at their workplace and work in their car and work. And on the other hand, we're also talking about that there will have automation and artificial intelligence taking some of our work away. So that there needs to be some kind of balance in that discussion. And I think it's a great thing to have a full-time work where you can go and you can earn your money and you can have a good life and you can have the skills that you need for the future and you can feel secure in your life. And that is, for me, the most important things that we can present as a part of the future.
Right. Torben, you had a point.
Yeah, because I think that this flexibility issue is an important one. And at my ministry, it was the workers' representatives that came up saying we want more flexibility. And I think that means we have to dig into it, really. Flexibility is not the same with flexibility. The demands workers have is to decide themselves when they want to work. The flexibility a company in a 24/7 global economy has is a different thing. And the conflicting interests are not going away there. And I think working time is an issue of a lot of conflict, possible conflict around there, and it will not be dissolved because flexibility is not the same if you look from the different sides. But at the same time, I think progressive politics and unions have to accept that the workers' demands are also changing and being more differentiated. We tried to analyze this in Germany, and we had an interesting finding. The demands and preferences of workers are very differentiated in Germany. There was only one point where people said nearly everybody agreed, and that is a better combination of work and private life. But when you then looked into it, half of the people said, that means for me, I start at 9, I finish at 5 in the afternoon, and I don't want to get no email, no call afterwards. And the other 50% said, well, I want to decide whether to go out in the afternoon, pick my kids from kindergarten or school, and then work in the evening. But I think the question is, for unions, is the issue of self-determination. Do people have the autonomy to decide by themselves? It's also a positive effect on health, etc., when and where they want to work. And of course, there have to be limits to protect people from themselves too. So we need regulations also in the future for flexibility, but we have to take the different demands and interests into our views.
That's interesting. So perhaps one could ask, perhaps we can do a quick poll here. So regulation versus organizing. If we're organized enough, we can make it the way we want, or do we need regulation? I don't know. Let's have a quick show of hands. Yes, I am. Yes. Okay, so regulation, raise your hand. I saw a few. One. Okay. Organizing. Okay, and we are at a trade union conference, so that makes good sense. But as Six said, that might be a bit, artificial question. But I think it's interesting to talk about what we should try to pursue as being the most important, regardless. And one question I would like you guys to address is, we talk a lot about that the threats, or how we cope with the changes at least. But perhaps you could reflect upon how can we as regulators or in government, but also in the trade unions, use these new technologies to our advantage. Can we use AI to organize better? Can we automate some of our processes to regulate better? What are your thoughts on this very quickly, because we are running out of time? Deborah.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we need to make a clear distinction between flexibility and insecurity. And I think that both my colleagues here are saying that. But we don't simply have to pay attention to working too much. We have to pay attention to people who are chronically underemployed because they have 0 hours contracts, because they cannot make ends meet with one job. And so I think we just can never confuse flexibility, and it's not surprising to me that workers in a German ministry would feel secure enough to say, now I want to decide where I work and when I work. That's very different from having to cobble together the bare minimum with 3 or 4 jobs. I think that there are lots of innovative uses of AI to reach out to workers who are not yet organized. In the United States, which has had a difficult time organizing, the AFL-CIO has an affiliate called
in the field of
America that uses AI to go door to door and is able to have a sense of what issues are important in what communities and where, and what issues come together for people. It's a way of reaching out and bringing people into some kind of collective group, whether it's not a traditional union yet, but you get them to give feedback and input into the issues that they're concerned about, which then allows you to keep contact with them. And I think that many of the freelancer unions are also using all kinds of media to reach out to those who are not in traditional workplaces. So I think it's a powerful tool.
I think that we'll take this opportunity for you guys to say the last word now as well. So think about that as well when you answer the question. And then, if Deborah, if you have anything to add afterwards, you're more than welcome to do that. Torben.
I think the question is dangerous. Talking about, because that very often distracts from the real issues. Of course, we have to think about how we use the technologies for our organizational power. But that should not stop us talking about where things really matters, and that's at the workplaces. So I think the crucial question is really how these technologies are used at the workplaces. And I think there, the simple answer is you need really employee not only involvement, but have employees having a say how this technologies are introduced from the very beginning. And that's what we try with the German ministry now. We have something where we encourage companies within the framework of the law, no opening up, no more flexibility there, but within the framework of the law to work with, for example, agile forms of work, etc., in the fields of work organization, health and safety, qualification, working time and working place. Try out new things, involving workers' representations from the very beginning, and also have some scientific evaluation. And we sponsor this in small and medium-sized firms, and the large firms can do it themselves, and make also some transfer on an online platform on this experimental learning places. And there have to be experiments that in the end, that can be decided, we don't want to go this way. Or we have to reshift things to make sure that it's really enhancing the quality of work at the workplaces. So I think we really have to do this hard work of going to all the companies, and the workers' representatives there have to go the hard way to really look, not trying to prevent new technologies to come into the companies, but to shape the use of the technologies from the very beginning. And I think that is the way we have to discuss artificial intelligence, robots, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Torben.
Well, I would just like to add that I had a lot of discussions in Denmark with workers for different kind of areas about this question. And I think the positive story is that people are really excited about this. And that most people are looking really at a bright future, thinking that this will be something interesting for their workplace as well, and it would create a better job for them. So I think it's very important to us to hold that goal very clear, that this is what it's about. It's not about working poor or having to work 2 or 3 hours here and there and finding your way. It's about creating the good jobs. That was my closing remark, but I will just say something more. And then the question about, can we use this technology ourselves as unions? Well, it could be tempting, I mean, to have ratings also at companies. Why couldn't the workers rate the companies? Is this a good place to work, or is it not a good place to work? Maybe we could turn some of that knowledge around and use it in another way. Because every company today tries to tell a story about how good they are. Everybody is so much into this CSR or to the new development goals for the future, sustainable development goals. How should we be the best company in the world and do everything good? It could maybe sometimes be good to meet them and say, well, let's look at the data. Let's see if you guys are as good as you say you are. And let's hear what the workers are saying. So I think maybe we could use some of these technologies. But of course, always do it carefully, because you could put the blame on someone who's actually trying to do good. But I think that could be something interesting for us to look at. Also looking at the companies that way.
Interesting idea. Deborah, do you have any
No.
final? That's wonderful. Okay, guys, give them all a big hand. Okay, so now I will encourage you guys just to stand up for a few minutes while we rig the next speaker. So just to get some blood into your legs, perhaps also the brain.
Un, deux. Does it work? It worked for DEBORAH. It should work for me. Un, deux. OK. Un, deux.
Okay, guys, I think we are slow but steady getting ready to welcome the next speaker, telling a bit on the European Pillar of Social Rights, Gothenburg and beyond, which is RAIMO PÄRSINEN. Give him a big hand. So RAIMO is a member of the Swedish Parliament, and he's the chairman of the Committee on the Labor Market. So hopefully he can give us some valuable expert insights on what is going on this field. But please, RAIMO, take it away.
Thank you, and it feels great to stand here with the friends of the trade unions and the Nordic model. And I'm, of course, an old lover to the Swedish model. And to me, the Swedish model, when I speak about the Swedish model, I mean the model on the labor market, which is the backbone for this country. I just want to be clear about that when Calder sits here. I'm going to talk a little about the pillar of social rights. And first thing that we now need to reflect on how to take this initiative forward and to make a real progress on the ground. So what is a European pillar of social rights? To me, it's about agreeing on certain common principles in order to address some of the main challenges as we member states are facing. So strong political commitment on concrete and realistic goals are needed. And we should focus on outcomes. A pillar must not mean that member states are told how to live up to the common principles. Do not focus too much on common legislation. And we must welcome all stakeholders to contribute at national, regional, and local level, as well as social partners and NGOs. And crucial in all this, though, is to respect the differences between member states. We need to take into account that the member states may have different starting points, and we need to respect different national systems. It is vital to promote upward social convergence for all member states. It is important to show that the union is of benefit to its citizens. Social Europe cannot be a zero-sum game. So this week, the Social Summit for Fair Jobs and Growth will be held in Gothenburg. The summit will gather EU heads of state or government and the social partners and other key stakeholders for an open discussion on how to promote fair jobs and growth. It will focus on how to make the most of new opportunities and tackle common challenges for the labor markets and welfare models of today and tomorrow. And by building on each country's perspective and experience, discussions will contribute to shaping a better future for Europeans. As part of the broader debate on the future of Europe, the Social Summit will provide a unique and timely opportunity for key stakeholders to discuss the social dimension for the EU and its member states. As member states, we face many similar challenges. The world of work is changing rapidly, with new opportunities and new challenges arising from globalization, the digital revolution, changing work patterns, and demographic developments. However, this does not mean that the solution in all cases is a new EU-level initiatives. And the main responsibility and the principal tools in this area lie with the member state. Let me give you one illustrative example from the Commission's reflection paper on the future on the social dimension. The EU social budget represents only 0.3% of the total public social expenditure in the EU. And so, in order to make a real progress, we therefore need action on member state level, regional, as well as on local level, and we need to involve all stakeholders. However, the EU level can contribute by providing an area for mutual learning and benchmarking, of course. And I'm a true friend of the European project and have always believed that we can achieve better by working together. In the follow-up of the proclamation, I believe it would serve us well to build on better use existing processes and instruments in order to achieve progress on the ground. In general, I don't believe the new EU-level legislation is the way forward. Any new proposals will need to demonstrate its added value. Through the European semester process, a regular and institutionalized follow-up of relevant principles of the pillar could be ensured within existing monitoring structures. Therefore, we welcome a new, more developed social scoreboard. This is a tool that could contribute to enhance visibility of social and employment developments in line with the relevant principles of the pillar. And Sweden will, of course, contribute actively on expert level in order to reach an agreement on a new, more developed scoreboard. There are two areas where we really need progress, and they are the equal treatment of minorities and inclusion of persons with disabilities. And it's, of course, also vital that the aspect of gender equality be truly mainstream in all areas covered by the pillar. I strongly support that these issues are well reflected among the principles of the pillar. These are important principles in order to ensure that all individuals have the possibility to contribute actively in society and on the labor market. They merit our attention, and I think they should be followed up within relevant parts of the European semester. So the conditions on the labor markets are rapidly changing by globalization, digitalization, and more flexible forms of employment. To tackle these challenges, or even turn them to opportunities require cooperation and political leadership. It's important to remember that we shape the future, it's not the other way around. If jobs of the future are to be created in Europe, the EU must be at the forefront of the digital developments, as tomorrow's new jobs primarily will be created in the service sector and the digital economy. I would also like to point out that technological development should be welcomed as a possibility to improve the working environment. Rather than protecting jobs, we need to make sure that we protect workers by taking advantage of the technological developments. And in response for the need for flexible solutions in the labor market, new forms of employment and other new ways of organizing work have emerged. One consequence of these developments is that it is now easier for companies and individuals to have work carried out on a pay-as-you-go basis. This can be beneficial both for those who doing the work and for those who want to have the certain job carried out. At the same time, a changed world of work may also lead to involuntary self-employment and an increasing number of more or less dependent self-employed workers and contractors. We also see that fixed-term employment has become more common. Contract labor is being used to a greater extent. Production is being outsourced, and companies are buying services instead of having their own employees. Technical development and digitalization bring many advantages, but may also lead to work intensification, increased stress levels, and blurring of the boundaries between work and private life. It may also outsource traditional employer responsibilities, such as health and safety protections to workers. These developments can lead to uncertainties about the divisions of responsibilities, applicable rights, and the level of social protection, and have a negative impact on, for example, work environment and working conditions. Fair and decent conditions are essential for ensuring that everyone finds a secure job where they are not exploited or worn out. Everyone should be able to work and live on their salaries. Workers should have the same level of protection regardless of where they work. There should not be different levels of protection depending on the size of the company. And structural changes presume arrangements that support workers in transition. A well-functioning unemployment insurance and adjustment measures like educational guidance and upskilling are key in this respect. Therefore, we need active labor market policies that provide individuals with the skills and competences required on the labor market. Employers, the social partners, and other relevant stakeholders need to be engaged in the ongoing process of identifying and designing the most effective policy measures. Moreover, access to education for the workforce, not least in the regular education system, in order to update the skills in line with the employer's need for competence, is the next urgent task to solve. The social partners and the transition organizations play an important role, identifying and addressing arising challenges, trends, and needs on the labor market. And employers are particularly important when it comes to contributing to the training content, offering places for traineeships and other forms of work-related learning. In Sweden, too many unemployed persons do not qualify for unemployment benefits. The Swedish government is therefore investigating how the conditions for unemployment benefits can be changed to cover more persons. The Swedish unemployment insurance also needs to be modernized to meet the citizens' expectation for transparent and accessible unemployment insurance. And I'm sure that all of you, that you all will join me in my wish that the Social Summit for Fair Jobs and Growth in Gothenburg will be a grand success. And with these words, I thank you for the invitation and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. PÄRSINEN. That was a beautifully formulated introduction to our last panel. Does this work? Yeah. Ah, okay, it does. And then I would like, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then I would, and then could we please have Mr. Weber, Mr. Thorvaldsen, and Ms. Lindstrand on stage, please. So this week, many people will be looking at Gothenburg, where the Social Summit is taking place on Friday. And I would like you to start with some reflections, maybe 3 minutes each, on the social pillar and the importance of the Social Summit. What does it mean, and what do you expect from it? THIÉBAUT, would you please begin?
Oh. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, we should recognize and emphasize the strong symbol that the Social Summit represents, and also the fact that the European Pillar of Social Rights will be proclaimed by the member states, the European institutions. It is symbolic, but the symbols are strong in our societies. And I can't even remember, I was tasting a colleague before this session, when was the last European summit dedicated on social issues? Maybe in 2000 for the proclamation on the social charter, but then, you know, so I mean 17 years after a lot of damages caused by some European policies, this is important. Now on the pillar itself, of course the pillar, as proclaimed, are only principles, 20 principles. And the most important will be, after that, to see how it will really influence European policies, made at European level, but also at member states level. And I really want to emphasize the fact that if you look at the pillar, it commits the European institution to deliver on social policies, and the European Pillar of Social Rights should have an influence on European law, but also on member states' policies. So member states can use it, they are not forced to use it. That will be a big challenge, but they can use it to improve their social situation. And also social partners are clearly mentioned in the pillar as stakeholders who are fully part of the process to implement the different principles. So on the implementation and on the impact on Nordic countries, I'm sure we will come back on that, but at least as a forward on the principles, this is what I wanted to say.
Please, Ulrika.
The social pillar is basically all about social rights and inclusion, even if it's not legally binding. or regulated. In context to the Nordic model, I think we can serve as a role model. So I'm very happy that we have the meeting and the summit here in Sweden, because it's all about social stability, security and safeness. And if you look at the Nordic model, that is what it has delivered to all of us. We have good working conditions on our labor market. We have strong unions. We are amongst a few that still are growing in the number of members. We also have strong employers' organizations, and we do collaborate, which is quite unique. We are almost on the same side, even if we can have different looks and views on how we should get to a certain goal, but we at least agree on the goal. The model has given us welfare, predictability, and gainfulness and stability in our communities and societies. However, I think it's paramount that we adapt the model to meet the future needs. That does not mean to undermine the model, which we can see currently in Swedish politics going on now, a lot about, I would say, not knowing exactly what the model is all about, or having very different views on what the model is all about, and that we have a role of educating each other there. However, we need to include and invite those who are not currently involved. We have a lot of organizations on both sides that are not organized yet, and we need somehow to make that, if we should use the benefits that comes out of the model, you also should be organized. It's not for everyone, I think. If we lose that, then I think this is sort of a lost case. It's all about having protected individuals, as previous speakers has been talking about. Because people who feel safe about the future also take risks. If they feel safe about their education and their transition, the possibility to transition or to change over to new possibilities, which we are really good at in the Nordic countries, because we don't protect the jobs, we protect the individuals. And that gives us people who are positive to change, that feels empowered, and it also lowers the risk for hostility, protectionism and extremism that we can see in many other places around the world, even here, but to a lower content, I think. I think that we want to strengthen the possibilities through work in education, and it will benefit the EU as an arena for enterprises, creativity, entrepreneurship, and last but not least...
Don't say competitiveness.
No, absolutely not. And last but not least, innovation. Because innovation is what have made the Nordic countries great. So that is also something that AI can't do. They're not good at innovating things that needs people, and people who come together from different angles and views.
Please, Carl-Peter.
Well, I will argue about competitiveness. So let's have the debate afterwards, no problem. I think first of all, you have to see the history behind the meeting in Gothenburg. It was called by Stefan Löfven when all the European citizens were screaming to make a rapid change of the future of Europe. After a long road of elections in countries where xenophobia parties grown, and directly after Brexit, it was obvious for the political system in Europe that Europe needs to change. If not, the whole European project should be toxic for all people living in Europe. So that was the reason Stefan Löfven called the Social Summit. It was not about a pillar when he called for it. It emerged a pillar from the work of the Social Summit, actually mainly from the Commission. And actually, I'm really happy that the European political parties, the political structures in the Commission actually took this serious, took the problem of Brexit in the right way. They could have continued with the same policies that created the problem in Europe last 20 years, as THIÉBAUT mentioned earlier on. To have a union only with open market, only for companies, only benefiting the already rich. But it becomes very toxic, and we still have a democracy. So it's creating actually a problem also for companies today. And that is the reason I think almost all European leaders will come to Gothenburg this week, and I'm really proud. It's not bad done by a metal worker from Örnsköldsvik to have all European leaders to Gothenburg. Of course, we are really afraid of the pillar in the Nordic countries. We will debate that a lot. Of course, we think it's a risk of interfering in the collective bargaining and the model we have here in Europe. And actually, we are quite afraid from the Nordic countries that a lot of trade unions, other political parties are now going rapidly in a federal way of federal see of the future of Europe. And of course, that will be for the Nordic countries a big debate and a big risk. And obviously, we can see that the European Union needs to have a better balance for the Eurozone. That's obvious that the Eurozone need to be stronger to protect their currency. And we have said from all the Nordic countries that we will not stand in the way of a closer connection between the Eurozone countries. And we can take part of many things, but we can't have a joint finance ministry if we don't have the same currency. So we will support that development, but we will try to find our way in this new emerging Europe. So how should we see on the outcome of Gothenburg? I think you're totally right. We must be optimistic, and I'm really optimistic that this will be the first step to a more just Europe. I think there is a genuinely call from people all around Europe to find a better balance between work and capital. Next step, though, will be more controversial. You know that we are having a big job amongst trade unions to enlarge Europe with a social protocol, where we have a better balance in the treaty on the difference between freedom of movement and the freedom of workers. And that next step will be more controversial. But I think we are on the right way to actually change Europe in a better way in the future. And I think Gothenburg will be a great start for that job.
Thank you. I would like to ask you, because in the Nordic countries, we often look at ourselves as a kind of rule model, because we have all these safety, we have the social welfare and safety packages and trade unions and so on and so forth. But we have still big groups in society which are excluded, and our trade unions focus mainly on people who have traditional jobs in traditional workplaces with a union club. So what Ulrika said about delivering when it comes to the Nordic model is absolutely true, and we have to adjust it to the future. And in my vision, maybe if we can be smart enough and adjust it in a generous and kind of inspirational way,
Yeah.
we can export it and make this a model for people to get inspired by and pick pieces of in their own countries, even if they don't have the same historic context as we have. And I would very much like to hear your opinion on that, on opening up, for instance, unions, because Six spoke a lot about collaborating, and we have been talking about global frameworks when it comes to digitalization. But still we have sometimes a competition situation between unions, and we don't always regard the big goal, organizing everybody and giving everybody a chance as our goal, but we pick the ones we have chosen to represent, and we could maybe collaborate better. So I would like to give the word to THIÉBAUT to begin and say, if you were to wish something from the Nordic model, from the Nordic countries, to inspire the social progress in Europe, what would you do, what would you want?
Yeah, about competition between trade unions, I come from France, so I know a bit about that. But it's clear that there is a huge challenge for the Nordic model, I don't know if it must be exported or copy-paste, but to inspire the European project. And I have to say that many times, and I fully understand the challenges for the Nordic model to protect its model. But I'm not sure whether in the long term, to only protect it will be sustainable for the goal to protect the Nordic model. I mean, the problem in our European project is that we developed an internal market without the proper social rules that must go along with an internal market. And we see huge differences between countries and even divergences who have developed with the crisis between countries. So now it's clear that we must organize an upward convergence with new measures, soft law with European semester that was mentioned, but also hard law that will ensure that we get at least some minimum standards. And of course, the idea is not to undermine existing ambitious models like the Nordic model, but to make sure that we reduce the gap that creates social dumping. This is the core issue. We can have the best agreement on posting, for example, posting of workers, and we are making progress on posting, which is good. But we will never solve the deep problem of the European project without relaunching social convergence on living conditions, on wages. I'm not talking about imposing a legal minimum wages in Nordic countries.
Good for you.
But at least, I mean, how to make sure that collective bargaining is part of the European project. If you look at the pillar, collective bargaining is part of is a fundamental social right. So we need to make sure that in many countries, not only in the Nordic countries, not only in France or in Germany, but in other countries, people can benefit for collective bargaining, and even institutions like IMF, ECB, for economical reasons, are, let's say, demanding or advertising the benefit of collective bargaining for sharing the added value, the wealth that is created, and to relaunch inflation. So it's more about, advertising the Nordic model than protecting it.
If I were to wish something, well, it's difficult to put it in such a big context, but when I talk to my European colleagues and colleagues around the world, it's very obvious that we have issues when it comes to organizing, and the Association of Swedish Engineers do organize self-employed people. We also organize managers, CEOs, and so forth. And that is not the case, and in some countries it's illegal if you are on a managing level to be organized. That is something we need to address, because we all have issues. They are just of different kinds, and we all need assistance and help in our work life. So that is one thing that we need to take into consideration, even in our own home countries, because that is not the case for all unions, and I think that is a way forward. But I also think that we need to take a more mutual responsibility if we are to travel and to make it equal. We have to find some sort of common standard, and if I would wish something, I would wish that it would be mandatory to be organized. If you are on the market, you need to be organized in either an employers organization or a union, because it's hard otherwise to find a good way to follow up and to see that everyone is following what comes out of the pillar and the social summit without going into strict regulations. And regulations are not a fun way to go with everything that comes with it. What we do know for sure is that our lawyers would have a lot of things to do, and if we can solve it by discussing and going forward that way and be constructive, I think that would be a good way forward.
Yes, Please, Carl-Petter.
Yeah, I think both Ulrika and THIÉBAUT are right, and I think we could benchmark everything between the Nordic countries in Europe, and we'd be happy to do that all the time. And now, right now, we have a lot of other countries coming here, of course, of high employment, low unemployment, very big growth compared with others. So right now we have something really positive to benchmark. And things that they are asking us, for instance, I mentioned the French banks yesterday. How is it possible that the humblebee is actually flying? And it does fly. It goes very well for all the Nordic countries, including Finland nowadays, actually, that have still small but still growth. I guess the biggest problem is if Europe, other European countries with low density, trade union density, try to force this negotiation by making laws all the time. It's really tough for us to say, well, we agree totally that you need that in Germany, but don't let it influence our model in the Nordic countries. If more and more countries are doing the same, it will be very tough to remain our model without changes, and that will in future will be a big problem for us. Our model is actually more flexible than other models. 2008, when the crises were hitting Europe, the Swedish workforce, actually by your organization and my old organization, IF Metall, they made a crisis agreement with the employer just a couple of months after the fall, and so already the year after we had really low increase of salaries, so only under 1% crisis agreement, where, for instance, Finland didn't go the same way. They continued with 3.7, 3.8 many years after the crisis, and that made them, of course, they could not compete with the salary level in Finland. And in many other European countries, you continued on much higher level, and what was hurt much more by the crisis than we were in Sweden. And when the immigrant crisis started in Sweden, or crisis when we had a lot of immigrants, 2013, 14, and 15, we were asked by the minister in August 2015 to find a quicker way to have educated people faster into workforce. They call it fast track. And we signed the first agreement in November, just 3 months later, actually for chefs, the first agreement. And now I think we have some 27 agreements on fast track for people from other countries to come directly into workforce. And right now, my member organizations, the 14 LO associates, are negotiating on how to help immigrants with low skill to have a more fast track into workforce in Sweden. And this is done by the parts, by the social partners. It's done out in big debates, of course, also in the Swedish society. But it's much easier to enforce changes done by trade union and employers together than by law. Because by law, you will have a lot of people saying, stop this, block this, don't do this way. It's much easier to find a more fair, balanced collective bargaining agreement than political laws. So I hope we can remain the same with this type of model also in the future.
Thank you. And then my last question to you would be about an issue we had raised here today. It's lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And when we talk about job security in the future, we often talk about employability, that actually the security does not lie in the job you have right now, but in your next job, the job you are able to get afterwards. And I would like to know if you see that trade unions will, in their work to progress, have to take a bigger responsibility for vocational training and education, and if we should kind of enlarge our domain to vocational training as well, and taking, giving maybe coaching or courses, or taking that bold for our members. Ulrika, please.
I think that we have a huge responsibility in encouraging our members to be active in the process. It's your own responsibility to take care for your own education, and to make sure that you get it if you are in a company that provides further education. However, I don't think that we should try to be expert on education. There are universities and so forth that are really, really good at that. So let them have that privilege to keep on doing that. But we do need to keep on the ongoing discussions that we have with our government on how to fund lifelong learning from an individual perspective. The companies has to be a part of it as well, of course. But I also think that we need to discuss the fundings that we get from the government, because there's an age cap, which applies very, very harsh if you want to go to a university when you're a bit older and more experienced. There is also a model for the universities where they don't actually get paid for having courses or shorter modules for people who are already working. That also needs to be adjusted. The universities has to do their part. They have to be quicker in shaping new curriculums. It takes about 2 years now, which is too long. And they also have to be better at giving short models and doing that on a distance. And that is ongoing, and I hope that we will see many more pilots than we have ongoing for the moment than we do now. So I think that is our responsibility, to keep that discussion going.
Yes, Carl-Peter.
Well, historically, we had good opportunities for blue-collar workers to lifelong learning. Until mid-90s, we had big programs where you could have insurance from the state if you went to education for having up to high school level education. It was a fantastic job, and we were actually very often the recruiters ourselves. So trade union leaders were going around in workplace and recruited, and we had about 10,000 blue-collar workers a year that went to education, and they worked 4 days in the ordinary workplace, and the 5th day they went to courses on mathematics or English or whatever, and they had a degree and a better skill and could take more difficult jobs in the companies. That changed dramatically. Former conservative government in Sweden. I think it's a high time to start it again. And I said already earlier this day that we have a discussion now with the minister that we should open up unemployment benefits for the possibility to go on unemployment benefits about 80% of your salary and go into high school. Or actually, I think we have to have a discussion also about higher education, because this is, of course, today more natural also for white-collar work and academics. And they are also mothers and fathers, and they need the salary or an income during study. So I think I would be happy to start a discussion with you and other organizations to also improve that system for university education. It's controversial because mainly it's paid by yourself by loans, so it's controversial, but I think the next step for a well-developed country as Sweden is also to take that to account.
That's great. So we have started a collaboration project between LO and Swedish engineers.
Yeah.
Congratulations. But then I would like THIÉBAUT to end and say some words. How do you see the social pillar fit into a new or maybe larger role for European trade unions? Could they take more responsibility, for instance, for education, or do you see other areas where unions could step in? We heard from Germany that the German government wanted to enforce workers' influence.
It's good because the first principle of the social pillar is on education and training. And training is part of trade union history. It's part of our DNA, in fact. This is linked to training opportunities, career opportunities, but it was part of our wish to empower people as well and to ensure them access to training. It was particularly important for blue-collar workers. And I see a huge challenge for us to reinvest in training in the future, and we have a particular role to play. First, because we are between the employer and the workers. So we can both negotiate good training provisions, good training policies with the employers, and make sure that we we can maybe better advise the workers and play this role, this intermediary role between the employers and the workers, the training policies and the workers. Also, there is a European challenge, and this is where maybe the European Pillar of Social Rights can apply, to ensure effective access to training. Because in many countries, for sure in Nordic countries, in my country, not in all the countries, but in many countries, you have a right to training. It depends on your company, it depends on your sector, sometimes it is guaranteed by law, but you have a right to training. It doesn't necessarily ensure that you have effective access, and we know that white collars benefit more from training rights, from the right to training than blue collar workers. So we can all go in the same direction, and we have every member state, every union or social partners can learn from each other on how to better ensure access to all workers to training provisions.
Thank you very much. And then come on, Peter, because we are going to leave you now in the hands of Carl Petter. But first of all, thank you, Ulrika, and thank you, Thibaut, for these very interesting remarks.
Thank you both. Thank you, Carl Petter.
So we are finally free. After this fantastic day, we will not be talking to you anymore. Thank you for being a wonderful audience.
And wonderful speakers. And, not to forget the wonderful team who made all this possible, from the NFS and the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. Especially thank you to Jose and Maike, but also all the others who've made this possible, Magnus, etc. So it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully see you soon.
Well, actually, you just took my job.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
It's disruption.
We promised to say thank you to all the organizers, and you heard the NFS, they've been working night and day, and Friedrich Ebert to have all the good speakers, all the participants. Over 100 participants in a Nordic conference. That's fantastic. So first of all, thank you very much for coming here this day to this really interesting discussion. And speakers, you made a fantastic input to our discussions and future thinking on problem for our workforce. And I would say, I will not try to make a summary of the day's discussion. I would say two things that I think we always underestimate. The Nordic countries, we are not going exactly the same speed all the time. So over the last 20 years, we all of us had a small, short period of glance. For instance, the Finnish glance period at 27 to 2011, fantastic time. And then we had the wonder of Norway. And Iceland actually is the only country that had two wonders. Just before 2008 and just after 2008. They are just amazing, the Icelandic people. And you all know the Danish glance in the period of the 90s where they had fantastic economic development. And right now, okay, I say it's going okay for Sweden. And just now in Sweden, this debate is a little bit difficult because we are now having record level employment in Sweden. 82.6% of adult people in Sweden goes to their job every day. It's the highest number since we had in early 1990s. And the employment is growing rapidly. Actually now with about 100,000 jobs a year. So since 2014, 250,000 people in Sweden have gone from unemployment to employment. And of course that is creating a fantastic problem for the government. What to do with all the surplus? One of the few countries in the world where we have a huge surplus and we can invest even more next year in helping people coming to new jobs and also to strengthen our welfare state and take down the taxes for seniors, etc., etc. If you have money, you can spend money. That's fantastic. So it's a little bit difficult right now to have a debate in Sweden about the big crisis on jobs. Because now the big crisis on jobs in Sweden is lack of workers. So we are not in the same... so I will say to all the trade unions leader here, I think we always underestimate the factor of full employment. A lot of the problem we are discussing on future of our work is actually a factor of high unemployment. When you have high unemployment, the employer could choose between unemployed people. And when you have no income, you are forced to accept 0-hour contract. You are forced to take a job where you work in the morning, have a 3-hour break in the middle of the day, and then you work at night. Crazy work life. That's a factor of high unemployment. So in Sweden, we have been focusing very much the last 5 years at LO to try to create an economy where you go to full employment. First day we said that was 1st of May 2013, where we actually took ETUC's policy on spending 2% of GDP on investment, 70 billion Swedish krona. I promise, all debaters, all politicians in Sweden said LO are crazy. You can't spend 2% of GDP when you have, at that time, a deficit. But actually, Magdalena Andersson, the finance minister in Sweden, in September last year, said that now we have increased the spending on investments with 76 billion Swedish krona. It's more than 2% of GDP, and the economy is it's evolving exactly as the economists at LO said. The growth are taking a higher speed. We have almost 3.5–4% growth last years, and of bigger growth, higher growth, of course, it will create a lot of new jobs. So I think that's something we always, as trade unionists, must be focused on. Low unemployment, high employment will always help us in the factor that globalization are reaching out to us. So I think sometimes we also in this, today we have not talked about full employment, so I said to myself, well, let's focus a little bit on that in the end. And secondly, and that many speakers have said today, is that change is not a new phenomenon in Western society. After the Second World War, almost 30% of adults in Sweden were working in different jobs in agricultural sector. And now it's 2.7%. Already in 1948, we had lack of workers in Sweden because of our economy was booming when the demand of our goods were super high after the war. So we actually decided in 1951 on the wage policy that we still work under in Sweden and also in many other Nordic countries, to always raise low salary a little bit more than average salary increase every year. Always raise the lower salary a little bit more than average income growth every year. That creates a good environment to have a super competitive society. And in the world scene, you can say whatever you want. If you can't compete, and we learned that the hard way in Sweden, 1989, 1990, 1991, where we lost 500,000 jobs in just 2.5 years, because we could not compete, because we had too high inflation and we could not compete with other countries with better economy. So I will say, of course, when we talk about flexibility, it's something completely different than what the employers are talking about. When we are talking about competitiveness, of course, it's something completely different than what the employers are talking about. We talk always about a competitiveness including our members, so that they are proud when they go to a job in the morning and they do meaningful things, that they actually can compete in the world economy. And as you know, Sweden is one of the most export-dependent countries in the world. Over 52% of our GDP is from exporting good things. 91% of all iron used in Europe is from the mines north of Sweden, with high salaries, good tax income, of course it's still a state-owned company. So we gain from natural resources ourselves. We can make a better society in the future. So I think we need to have this dialogue much more. And again, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and NFS, I really, really want to thank you to have had this idea, and to the speakers coming from all over Europe here to make your input in the meeting, and to all the participants to come here to make this day possible. That was just amazing. And as you heard earlier on, we promised to give all the speakers a gift, but we didn't bring flowers or anything else. We bring something what we think is actually even better. We bring them a support for an organization that we have together in Sweden between all the three federations, LO, TCO and SACO. We are owners of an entity working with trade union solidarity in the developing country that we call Union to Union. And I have actually the head of program here, Sigrid Bergfeldt. So please come up here and talk a little bit about what you will do with 10,000 Swedish kronor we're giving them today.
Thank you, Carl-Petter. Thank you very much for inviting us, and of course giving a generous gift to Union instead of chocolates or flowers, as you said, to the speakers. I had the opportunity to listen to you a little bit here in the end, and it's really amazing how interesting this labor market in change is for all of us, and especially, of course, in my perspective, it's also interesting to take in the poor countries, or the countries with a great big population of poor people, and that's where Union to Union have our efforts. And we, of course, promote free and strong and democratic trade unions in order to increase the possibility to self-sustention and sustainable livelihoods and peace, societies that are filled with democracy. And in Nordic countries, this is a normal thing for trade unions. We have SASK in Finland, we have LOFTF in Denmark, and LO Norway, etc., and of course FES in Germany that support this conference. But Union to Union are actually the largest organization right now in the Nordic countries, and we support trade union projects in over 100 countries. And we are convinced that a better world is possible only with decent work and decent life conditions. And to achieve this, solidarity from the Nordic trade unions are very important, crucial to support weaker trade unions in the world. And I chose 3 projects in our project portfolio that are connected to the themes that you have been discussed this day. And one of the projects that we support is through the Swedish union GS, Skog och Trä och Grafisk branch. And their partners in Asia and also in Latin America, because they are supporting their sisters and brothers to organize in the graphic and packaging industry, where adaptation to the growing e-commerce is enormous, puts enormous pressure on the trade unions and on the workers. Another project is in Colombia, Peru, and Dominican Republic, where Swedish trade unions Unionen and Handels supports union working in the retail sector. And I'm sure that you are familiar with the expression fast fashion. And that is really creating a new era, because fast fashion makes companies move in and out of markets so quick that trade union rights and workers' rights are really constantly violated, and people lose their jobs from one day to another. So the support to the trade unions to adapt to a new reality is very important. A third example is, of course, digitalization, hard word, and globalization that are putting a lot of pressure on post and logistics. These areas were earlier strongly organized in national companies. And the shift that has come is very rapidly, actually, with the multinational companies, won't mention the name, the war, but they are taking over market shares in all over the world. And Swedish trade union SECO supports their trade unions partners, for instance, in Senegal. And within the Global Union, they focus on new ways of organizing and also, of course, occupational health and safety. These are just 3 examples of the projects that we have in our project portfolio, and I think that it's crucial with solidarity to the poor countries, because otherwise we will never achieve any rights in Sweden as well in the long run. So thank you very much for this generous gift that you're giving to union. It will help in connecting to these projects and support in solidarity other countries' efforts with trade unions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tack så jättemycket. Jättesnällt, tack så mycket. It's very good to give a gift and have the gift yourself. Thank you very much. And for everybody, thank you very much. And let's continue with the discussion on future of work and how we should make the daily life for our members even better in the new economy. So thank you very much for coming, and hope Gothenburg will be a starting point of a more just Europe. Thank you.